It is the short story that launched a relatively promising career. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we're here with this week's review. Dalton, what are we reviewing?
We're going to get back to our roots here. We busted our asses in October, so it's time to take some time and enjoy ourselves. This is Indian Camp by Ernest Hemingway.
That's right. We've got 6 good things, 6 bad things, quotes, full literary analysis, a rating, and a recommendation after the bump.
Okay. 3 good things, 3 bad things about Indian Camp. You want to start? You want me to start?
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
First good thing, there is not so much as a wasted letter here.
All right.
2, this is 800-ish words, and every character present is tangible, even the 2D characters.
Okay.
3, Hemingway was born in 1899. This was published in 1924. And though the Native Americans are not presented in the most desirable light, neither are they cardboard cutout stereotypes.
Okay. I have the prose is so simple and so clean that it's just unbelievably flawless, how easy it reads, how it flows. This is a coming-of-age story with absolutely no niceties. This is realistic. And this feels like it was written yesterday, but the events that are taking place in this story are gone forever. This was decades ago, and we'll never have this again.
Right.
But bad things. It's hard to say bad things about Hemingway, but give it a shot.
Sure. Number 1, if there was a book, a type of Mad Libs of Hemingway book, this short story would eventually be written.
Okay.
Right? You leave open the blanks, someone's going to eventually write Indian Camp.
Okay.
2, if you were not in Hemingway mode, there are so many stutters at the start of this short story that you might not read the story. You might not continue. And 3, the inclusion of Nick Adams makes this story feel, for me, after reading the entire Hemingway canon of short stories, too moralistic.
Okay. I have that there is a lot going on here that isn't explained to us. There are stories within stories in this piece. The story is very transformative, but it ends right where it begins. And no matter what you do, you will never be as good when you publish your first story.
Yeah.
You kind of knocked it out of the park with this one.
You feel a little bit embarrassed about everything you've ever written at this point, right?
I've always felt embarrassed about everything I've written, so yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah, you don't share anything with me.
Well, I don't. I might have to do
people
that.
on Twitter, apparently, but that's fine.
Do I?
That's fine.
Do I?
Normally it's my writing that you end up sharing on Twitter.
Do I?
Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Anyway, do you have a favorite quote? I will change the subject
okay.
there.
For me, I think what you have to go to on this short story is the final line. In the early morning on the lake, sitting in the stern of the boat with his father rowing, he felt quite sure that he would never die.
Wonderful.
Speaking of Nick Adams.
Oh, I don't need it. I wrote it down.
Okay.
I have the quintessential Hemingway truth line.
Uh-oh.
But her screams are not important. I don't hear them because they are not important. Yeah. Which is actually a pretty damn good line, too, honestly. But no, that is quintessential Hemingway at its finest. Yeah. There is a lot that we could be talking about here. But do you have a place where you would like to start with this?
Well, I think we should probably start with something that you've already mentioned, this being a coming-of-age story.
Okay.
But you said, what was the line, there are no niceties?
There are no niceties.
And I think part of the reason that it feels that way is not only... I think that this is a coming-of-age story in the way that coming-of-age stories happen.
Okay.
In real life.
Okay. There's no fantasy here.
Well, Nick Adams is far too young to be around this, right?
Okay.
That's how we come of age in real life. It won't be until years later that this little Nick Adams is really thinking about this, and then he will have some coming-of-age realization, right? The way that we so often get these presented in young adult literature is we have this coming-of-age moment, and we immediately learn the lesson.
Okay.
Which is not how things happen in real life, is it? What happens in real life is you see something that you were far too young to be seeing.
Yes.
Why are mommy and daddy wrestling? Right? And it is not until years later that this works its way through your brain and unravels until there's just a piece of paper laying there that was once a ball of crumpled words.
I think what's really interesting about this is it's not a fantasy coming of age. This is a very realistic depiction of a coming age event, like you said. However, at the end of this, Nick says that he believes that he cannot die. which I believe is very much a Hemingway comment on the young man believes he's immortal. This is the young man who goes off to war because I can't die, because I'm going to defend my country. That is a very indicative thing of a young man in this time. So I think that's really wonderful to get that concept of immortality through youth. Because that's the first step of really becoming a man, is you get that idea that you're invincible, that you can take on the world and whatnot. And this seems to be that step that defines that for Nick.
Right. And to perhaps illustrate this a bit further, early on in the story, and this is what I was looking through my notes for, I couldn't figure out where it was, but Uncle George, when Nick and his father land on the other side of the river, right?
Yes.
Uncle George is handing out cigars.
Yes.
Why is that? There's a baby being born, right?
Okay.
But this baby is in flux. Yes?
Yes.
This baby might die. This mother might die. This was that time period, right?
Yeah. This isn't just like go to the hospital, take care of it.
Right. These things might not go well.
Yes.
So they land. George is handing out cigars. Boom. Boom. Do you know what this is?
What is this?
This is in Beowulf when he says, I will fight the beast naked. It is braggadocious.
Okay.
Naked not meaning naked, meaning without my sword.
Yes.
But what he's saying is, I've already won.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
This beast is going to come through, and I'm going to kill it.
Okay.
The battle's already decided. I don't even need my sword. So when they land, Uncle George, his baby's already born, baby.
Boom. Done. Okay.
Right?
Very interesting.
So it is interesting to see that little bit of immortality foreshadowed earlier.
Okay.
Because it's not just immortality. It is the promise to win. It is the promise that thy will be done. Right? The man's will be manifest.
Now, you did say that if we were to have a Hemingway Mad Lib, we would eventually come up with the story of Indian Camp. And I'm going to agree with you there that this is a great example. If you've never read Hemingway, Indian Camp's a hell of a place to start. Because this has all Hemingway elements just balled into one. You have cigars. You have a man doing what must be done. You have a learning moment. You have death and immortality. You have a suicide reference. I mean, it just goes on and on.
You have a woman present that adds nothing to the story.
What was the phrase that Uncle George used? I believe he called her a squaw bitch.
Yeah, that's a racial slur, Dalton. We probably shouldn't put that on the channel.
No, I'm just... I would like to point this out, that even at that time period, that would have been a hell of a line to include in a story. And that takes a lot of gusto and a lot of guts to include that, a Hemingway trope again.
Sure.
So leave me alone. I had a point here. I just didn't want to say it.
Well, and also, if we are going on Hemingway tropes, on page 69, and I've got the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway. I still don't know how to say this. The Finca Vigia
Okay,
edition.
I believe you.
So, we've got these lines here. His father finished and stood up. Uncle George and the three Indian men stood up. Nick put the basin out in the kitchen. Uncle George looked at his arm. The young Indian smiled reminiscently. I'll put some peroxide on that, George, the doctor said. So, Nick's father goes from his father to the doctor.
Okay.
And this is a switch that we see in Hemingway quite often, where someone is the man until they're something else. Someone is their name until they are the man, right? And it's hard to tell, for me, why that's being done here.
Okay.
But it seems to be this distancing, right? Because he's talking to George, who is his brother.
Yes.
But he's using this very cold terminology.
Okay.
I'll put some peroxide on that, George. Right?
Okay.
So this is an opportunity for Nick, who we're seeing the story relatively through, to look at his father in a different light.
Fair enough.
Because he is distancing himself from his own relatives.
Okay.
Because it is... What is a man if not his work?
Very
and in
true.
his work, all people have to be treated the same, family or not.
I think it's also very telling. Have you ever been somewhere where you met up with somebody, and I'd say a family member, somebody you know very, very well, and you're exposed to their line of work, and it feels delightfully uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Because when you are doing your line of work, you become the embodiment, like you said, of that work. I used to work at a bookstore, and my oldest sister came to visit me one day. They were doing some shopping. And after I got done dealing with a customer, they come up and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, you sound like the old guy from Family Guy when you talk to people. Like, you get this really just terrible customer service voice, and it's creepy.
Yeah.
And then I realized after 4 years, I'm like, oh, that's why nobody liked me here. This all makes sense now.
Well, but everyone puts on the face.
Yes, you have to put on that face, and that is a Hemingway trope. The man does what the man is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And if what you're supposed to do is your career, there you go. The writing in this, I think, is a great example, again, of Hemingway's writing. Not just Hemingway tropes, but his writing itself. Because it is very simple, it is very minimalistic, it's very clean. What's the Hemingway, the truth line that you're always talking about?
When I sit down to write, I something like, I sit down to write the one truest line I know, or something like that.
That is Hemingway in a nutshell. Which is why I think this would be a great introduction. However, this is the first time I've read this.
Really?
Every time you get Hemingway, you get Hills Like White Elephants, you get The Killers, you get A Clean, Well-Lighted Place. You never read Indian Camp. That's a little disappointing.
Yeah, it is. Because it's not bad. I think, and here's where I think the bias comes into play.
Okay.
I think because this is so quintessentially Hemingway, that people who are introducing Hemingway to us, to our generation, this is played out.
Okay. Maybe so.
So they think, if it's played out to them, they never think that it would be a good introductory text for anyone else, right? Or they think that you should have already read this shit. What are you doing?
Was a literary major, you should have already read this shit. Story of my life, Peter. Anyway, a question for further discussion, since I've just done like a half dozen quickies in the last week, so that's stuck in my brain. The Indian father in this story, did he slit his own throat?
I think so.
You think so?
I think so.
I think that's kind of open to discussion there.
Okay.
If you're going to kill yourself, not a lot of people choose to slit their own throat.
Right.
Seems a little far-fetched, seems a little bit out there, especially if he slit his throat and no one noticed.
Well, he's also, he's altered, right?
Yes, he took an axe to the foot or something like that.
Well, and you've got the smell when you go in.
Yes.
Right. So I'm assuming those are drugs, right?
You think
We're
so?
We're smoking drugs.
You think so?
Maybe.
I kind of took it differently.
It smelled bad.
His foot he took an axe to the foot 3 days ago.
Yeah.
This woman's been in labor for 2 days now.
Yeah.
This is an unair-conditioned, hot environment.
Yeah.
None of those two things are going to smell great after a couple days.
Okay. But we get that. Okay. I think that's interesting.
Here's my thought process on it here, and maybe I'm just stretching too much. A man is only as good as a man is. Hemingway.
Okay.
A man has to do what a man has to do, right?
Yeah.
This gentleman is maimed.
Yeah.
He took an axe to the foot. This is a time period where if you take some kind of physical blow like that, especially if it's an open wound, you're probably not going to make it. Especially in a less...
an impoverished area?
An impoverished area. That's a good way to put it. Was this man killed out of pity? Because if we look at it, he's not going to do any good for this.
Well, then why do we have the conversation about suicide at the end?
I don't know. Now, if he does, let's say, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that he did kill himself. Did he kill himself because he knew? It's over for me. A maimed man is no good for this life.
For me, that's where I see this story having gone. Is that he knows that he is going to be hobbled. He will not be able to provide.
Yes.
Now, is there utility in half a man versus 0 men? Right. So I think that there's argument there to be had, but I think that it probably goes deeper than that. It, for me, felt like maybe he... I mean, these are people, right?
Yes.
I know this was published in 1924. Feels like a long time ago. Sounds like a long time ago. These are still people.
Yes.
He doesn't want to be in this relationship.
Possibly so.
Right? But he's got a child coming.
And,
and he's maimed.
That's when they say, a mother becomes a mother upon conception. A father becomes a father when he sees the baby.
Right.
Well, sometimes it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Sometimes when the father sees the baby, he says, well, this isn't a good situation for me to be in. Now, if this gentleman cannot provide for his family, and we want to read into the fact that, yes, he did kill himself, to slit one's own throat in order to get out of a situation which you are not adept in handling is a pretty impressive feat.
It is a very impressive feat. That's why I think that he was also drugged up, right?
Yeah.
But we've also got this line, and it's immediately after the line that you quoted earlier. No, I haven't any anesthetic, his father said, but her screams are not important. I don't hear them because they're not important.
Yes.
The very next line is very Hemingway. The husband in the upper bunk rolled over against the wall.
Okay.
That's the moment he's done.
Okay.
Because what happens is we get this line that communicates that Nick's father is very capable of delivering this child.
Yes.
And both of these people are going to live.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would have voiced concern.
Fair enough.
The man sees that. All right, well,
I'm out.
I'm done.
Okay.
So,
it is a little upsetting to read this piece and to know Hemingway's story, because this is very telling that even early in his career, what was he, 25, 26 when this was published?
it would have been 25 when it was published.
25? That suicide thought's still in there.
Yeah.
Or it's already in there.
The germ is there.
The germ is there. So, I don't know. It is a dark piece, but it doesn't feel like a dark piece.
And why doesn't it feel like a dark piece?
I think because the focus is not on the death of the father here. The focus is on the birth of the Indian child.
Right.
And through the birth of the child, young Nick becomes a man.
Right.
So there's more revelation here than anything.
But I think that it is also necessary to note that, okay, so the reason this doesn't feel like a tragedy is because it's sandwiched
Okay.
by life.
Okay.
But even in a tale of birth, and even in a tale of coming of age, Hemingway makes sure to slip in death.
Yes.
Hemingway not only makes sure to slip in death, makes sure to slip in death by one's own hand.
Yes.
The choice of death. So I think that is very necessary to... Okay, so we've got... Where do we start the story? At the lake shore, there was another rowboat drawn up. The two Indians stood waiting. So you've got this symbol of life, this symbol of timelessness that opens the story, right? The river.
Yeah.
This symbol that things move on.
Yes.
Opening the story. You end the story in the early morning on the lake, sitting in the stern of the boat with his father rowing. He felt quite sure that he would never die.
Okay.
And here's the amazing part about this. 5 and 6 lines earlier, we have the dialogue, "Is dying hard, Daddy?" "No, I think it's pretty easy, Nick. It all depends." That's a paragraph earlier.
Yeah.
That is a Hemingway paragraph, which means it's 4 lines earlier.
And I know we always get a little bit of flack when we talk Hemingway because we gush over Hemingway. But even in those very few lines that you read, there are stories upon stories that can be told.
Yeah.
Hemingway has this ability to, and I think that's what makes him so great. He has an ability that every single sentence, every single word is necessary and important. It tells the story.
Well, and here's one of the big things about writing dialogue.
Yes.
Writing dialogue is difficult.
Yes.
Not many people can write dialogue. Dialogue is more about what people are thinking than what they're saying. Dialogue is all about how I register what you're thinking.
Yes.
I respond as a person on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, conversation-to-conversation basis on what I think you're thinking. Not what you're saying, but how I think you feel.
Okay.
Right? So let's just read this exchange. "I'm terribly sorry I brought you along, Nicky," said his father, all his post-operative exhilaration gone. "It was an awful mess to put you through." "Do ladies always have such a hard time having babies?" Nick asked. "No, that was very, very exceptional." "Why did he kill himself, Daddy?" "I don't know, Nick. He couldn't stand things, I guess." "Do many men kill themselves, Daddy?" "Not very many, Nick." "Do women?" "Hardly ever." "Don't they ever?" "Oh, yes, sometimes." "Daddy?" "Yes." "Where did Uncle George go?" "He'll turn up all right." "Is dying hard, Daddy?" "No, I think it's pretty easy, Nick. It all depends." So, first off, that little block of dialogue was kicked off with, "I'm terribly sorry to have brought you along, Nicky."
Yeah.
Why do we kick it off there? Because Dad is saying Nick's upset.
Yes.
Nick should not have seen all that gore with the birth. Nick should not have seen a man kill himself.
Well, if you look at it, if you want to look at this, from a scene-setting situation here, this is the man who obviously just got done assisting with the birth of a child.
Yes.
That's a difficult task, especially at this time with no anesthetic. He did this literally by just showing up at a remote area and doing this. This is the man who steps away from this and takes a break. He breathes, he finally calms himself, and looks over and notices the son is upset. He's like, shit. I'm sorry.
But where does Nick immediately go? Immediately after, his father's saying this because he saw a man die.
Yes.
Nick asks about women having trouble with babies.
Yeah.
So Nick's still there.
Yes.
He's not here yet.
He has not processed what's going on.
He's in the reptilian brain saying, okay, these are processes.
Okay.
He's not in the frontal lobe where people say, okay, this is not worth it anymore, I'm done. Mm-hmm. Then he gets around to do people kill themselves. And Nick's father tries to soften the blow. I don't know. Maybe he just couldn't handle things, right?
Yes.
Do many men kill themselves, Daddy? And then where does he go? Not many, Nick. Because what he's trying to do, he's trying to degerminate that seed.
Yes.
Right? That once you understand that something like suicide is an option,
yes,
it can spiral out of control.
And it's a very good example of a father and son having conversation.
Yeah.
It's the father diffusing the situation, but still caring for the son. I remember this, and I don't know why I have this little memory fucking stuck in my brain here. But as a kid, we were watching Law and Order. I love Law and Order with a passion. And I was very young, and I looked at my father. I said, "What is a prostitute?" Because they just killed a prostitute. And he said, "Yep." And just kept going. That's it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
But no, it's a great example of dialogue. And I know a lot of people are working through NaNoWriMo this month. And let's be honest, you're just putting words on pages now because you're just getting your word count in. But when you go back and you look at dialogue, Hemingway is someone you absolutely need to keep in mind when you're working through your dialogue.
Yeah, because you want to make sure that characters are three-dimensional. They're responding to ideas, not things.
Yes. Anything else you want to talk about with Indian Camp before we wrap this up here?
I don't have much.
Okay.
That was what I had, pretty much.
Okay. Well, what would you rate this?
I would give this 93 cigar in the darks out of 100.
93 cigar in the darks. I gave this 91 Cuban cigars. You got to have that Cuban element when you're talking about Hemingway.
The's no Cuban element in here.
It doesn't matter. Hemingway was a fan of the Cubans.
This is pre-Cuba Hemingway.
That is okay.
I'm going for verisimilitude.
But a great story nonetheless.
Yes,
it is very hard to give a Hemingway story a short rating.
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
Because we have that element of turning and looking at the wall.
Okay.
The Killers by Ernest Hemingway.
Okay. I suggested, because we haven't done Hemingway in a while. Very long while, actually. A lot of people, this may be their first introduction to us gushing over Hemingway. You have to read Hills Like White Elephants. That is the Hemingway, in my opinion.
And, okay, so that was the connective tissue for you, was that is the Hemingway.
Yes,
okay.
And this felt very much a good introduction to Hemingway, but I think you have to read Hills Like White Elephants if you want to get that punch.
I think that understanding something like Indian Camp, though, is important to understanding Hills Like White Elephants.
Oh, yes.
Because you and I both had that experience in our education where Hills Like White Elephants was our first Hemingway.
This?
Yeah, and it was the first Hemingway that was handed to us, right? And at that point, you don't know what to do with it. You don't know where to go with it.
Correct.
You don't know what it's about.
But if you look at Hemingway's growth and development as a writer between Indian Camp and Hills Like White Elephants, you have a lot of similar elements. You have life, you have death, the birth, the woman just being the placeholder for the man to have a conversation.
Right.
But they're more developed ideas. They're deeper. There's a lot more thought going on here. The dialogue is gorgeous.
Yeah. Dynamic.
Yes, very dynamic. But you have to read it. You have to give it a shot. And, if I may, shamelessly plug ourselves here.
Go ahead.
We reviewed both of those.
Yep.
So you should definitely check out those reviews. Back when we were young and freshly shaven, and this set was empty.
It was about 10 months ago.
But if you like things like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. We do this all the time. And give this video a like, because you cannot not like Hemingway.
Be sure to check us out on Twitter at StripCover and on Facebook at StripCoverLit.